my daughter that was born when I was 22, she wasn't in my life at that time.
Mm.
So I literally had nothing. And I decided that day, that night, to actually to commit suicide. And I didn't attempt suicide. I committed suicide, and I was found dead.
All right, well, welcome everybody. This is Christian Perspective with Matthew Tingblad. This is also the first time that I am doing a video with someone else, a friend, a guest here. This is Kevin Azizi. I met Kevin at my small little church out in Los Angeles when I went there, and Kevin showed up. I think you were like a volunteer at the time, or
Yeah, I was
through a
actually
program.
I was going through Bible college, and I was doing an internship.
Yeah, and so anyway, I had the chance to hear Kevin's story, and I just thought it would be a great opportunity for my audience on YouTube to also experience this and hear a little bit about Kevin's story. And we'll probably be even doing more stories in the future, some just because most of the content, if you've been following my channel, has been reasons why we can believe that Christianity is true. But I also want people to see that this is a real living God who changes lives, and what better way than to just showcase some stories and testimonies of people who have encountered God in cool ways. So, Kevin, thank you so much for showing up, and looking forward to this. Looking forward to you sharing your story. It's been a while since I've had the chance to hear it.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I mean, thank
so,
you so much, Tim. That's awesome, man.
yeah. So I'm just going to give the floor to you if you want to start kind of what your life was like before Christ and what happened, and let's see where it goes from there.
Yeah, so I was born in Iran. I'm Persian and Assyrian. Essentially, I'm Middle Eastern.
Okay.
uh, I was born into like a Muslim background, Muslim family. You know, religion in my family was never something like I never practiced personally, but it was forced on me to practice. So, but it really wasn't to have like a relationship or anything. So, so I just kind of did it just to do it. But when I turned about 14 or 15 years old, my mom and dad, we had came to America. We immigrated to America from Iran, you know. And when I was about 14, 15 years old, my mom and dad, they divorced. They decided that they just wanted to do that, and it
Mm,
affected me in a very, very it just affected me, a lot, because
yeah.
in my culture, we don't typically do divorce. You know what I mean? In the Middle Eastern culture,
Mm,
it's like better or for worse, you're with that person. That's it, you know. And so when that happened, it really affected my life in a major way. Around 14, 15 years old, I just didn't want to do nothing, and I turned to drugs. I turned to, you know, uh, just out on the streets sometimes, with friends. I had friends that are gangbangers and gang members and things like that. And
wow.
it really just I just didn't care about anything. Ultimately, that led me to a 15-year addiction. I suffered from addiction, to heroin, to just drugs. I mean, I was a drug addict, so it didn't matter what was in front of me, what was presented on the table. If I got high, I did it. You know,
Wow.
and but my drug of choice was heroin, and that was kind of my life for about 15 years, till the time I was about 29.
That's a
you
long
know
time.
it is
Yeah.
a very
Long
long
time
time.
to be in that world.
you know
Um, Out of curiosity, would you be willing to explain a little more as to how the divorce affected you? Like what did it kind of bring up in you that led you to try and find help through the drugs? Was it
yeah,
like
so
grief or guilt or something?
no, it was mainly because, like, I think it was just because, it was numbing pain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, like you have to understand. I have a sister, and when my mom and dad divorced, my whole the whole fabric of what I thought was my family was torn apart.
Hmm.
My sister was pulled away from me. I lived with my dad. My sister lived with my mom. My mom at that time, she was seeing other men. It just like for me to numb my feelings, my pain, right? That's why I turned to drugs, because it provided an area of comfort for me.
Yeah.
Like it was I was comfortable in that state, and
So
and
kind of
so
like mourning the loss of a family in a sense, and just not wanting to feel that, if I'm hearing you right. And the drugs kind of helped
exactly,
you get out of that
exactly,
slump. Yeah. Okay.
exactly. And so it was like numbing the pain, and my friends that I had, throughout high school and things like that, and growing up, it was just those were my friends, those were my family. So that, as I thought, I was a functioning addict. When I graduated high school, I had jobs and work, but still I was on drugs. At 22 years old, I met this girl, and we had a kid a year later. And I remember the first phone call that I did to my dad and told him that he was gonna be a grandfather. His first immediate response was, "You need to get an abortion."
Jeez. Yeah.
No support, no nothing, no like, hey, we'll help you through this. So that actually led me into more of my depression because of not having support, which therefore led me to go deeper into this rabbit hole of doing drugs. Now instead of just doing heroin, now I'm mixing all different types of drugs together just so I could survive. I mean, at the end of the day, you know my time operated on my drug dealer's time. you know so if I had to be at work at 8 a.m. and I didn't get high, and it's called being hurt. It's like your body's hurting, you're in pain.
Hmm.
And if my drug dealer was like, well, I'll be there at 11 to serve you, then I didn't go to work until 12:30. You know,
Wow. Yeah. So you were really enslaved then to the
yeah,
addiction.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, addiction. From what I'm beginning to understand about addiction is a worship problem, right?
Hmm.
So I used to worship the drugs, right? And the solution to that is has to be worship also, right?
Sure.
So so
So
so
what do you mean by worship there? Because some people, they hear worship and they think like just this
sure.
thing you do in church, you know.
Yeah, no, 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 no. Worship means anything you give something worth to. You know what I mean? So when I'm giving more value to something, whether it's drugs, whether it's a church atmosphere, whether it's, I mean, whatever people are into, right? These days, you're
Hmm.
worshiping that thing that you're seeking, right? If you're allowing that thing to control your life, in essence is a worship. You're worshiping that thing. You're idolizing that thing and you're putting it in front of you as it dictates to you, like, this is the time you're gonna go to work. This is the time you're gonna wake up. This is the time you're gonna go to sleep. This is how you're gonna spend the rest of your week. So it's a worship problem. So I worshiped my way into addiction, and I learned over the many, many, many years, which we'll get into that, for me to worship my way out of addiction.
Mm.
you know?
Okay. So many, many years in that rut and taking drugs and eventually mixing drugs and just trying to get on that high and
Yeah.
feed the addiction. So what changed?
So in 2015, I literally had lost everything in life. I'm a
Mm.
29, I'm 37 now, but in 2015, I'm like 29 years old. I had lost everything. No money, no direction in life, nothing. My daughter that was born when I was 22, she wasn't in my life at that time.
Mm.
So I literally had nothing, and I decided that day, that night, to actually to commit suicide, and I didn't attempt suicide. I committed suicide, and I was found dead by my mom, which, I had accomplished suicide, and I was found dead for 7 minutes. And and my mom, she came home early that night for some weird reason. I mean, she didn't. She even told me this later on. She's like, I was gonna stay late, but something inside me told me to go home early.
Wow.
You know, so she came home early, and so she had found me in this state that, to her, it appeared like I was sleeping. When she tried to wake me up, she she said that I was non-responsive, and
Okay.
so she started freaking out. She went downstairs to her neighbor at that time. There's a neighbor living downstairs from her who was a registered nurse, and just so happened he happened to be home, and he came and he said, "Ma'am, like, your son is not breathing. You need to call 911." So she's calling 911. She told me, he started CPR, he started all of that, and nothing was happening. The
Wow.
EMTs came, you know, and basically they were like, the report said DOA was dead on arrival, you know, and so they tried. My mom said they were trying so many different things to resuscitate me. They were trying. She said there was a needle they were sticking me. And typically when you overdose on heroin or any type of opiate, one drug that the EMTs will always hit you with is called Narcan, and Narcan reverses the effects of any opioid overdose. So it automatically sobers you up and brings you back to life, but it also brings you to the point where your body is aching and you want more drugs.
Oh,
so
yeah.
so so
Could you explain a little more how you attempted to kill yourself?
yeah, so I I had a friend who was a gang member here in LA, a big blood. If you don't know what a blood is, it's one of the gangs in
Yeah.
Los Angeles.
Bloods and Crips, right?
Bloods and Crips,
That's
yeah.
about the extent of my knowledge, is what they're called.
Right.
But
But so I had gotten some China white heroin from him. I bought 2 grams, and I had premeditated how I was gonna do it. I was gonna. A couple of days before, I had a huge argument with my mom, and I was so mad. I was so mad. I was so angry. I was so just. I wanted to hurt my mom and dad more than anything because, like they were, Middle Eastern parents. They're not like American parents. They're
mm,
very, some of them, they're not very understanding, and they don't understand like mental health. They don't understand depression. They think it's like, get over it, move forward, you're a man. You know what I mean?
oh, okay, yeah.
So so with me, my mom and dad, they were saying like, look, you're a loser, you're this, you're that, blah blah blah, you're a junkie, you need to change your life, you need to do this. And I was so mad having this argument with them that I said, you know what? I'm going to show you a junkie. I'm going to do something to hurt you so you understand what it feels like. And
Wow. Yeah.
so what I did was I took 2 grams of China white heroin, which is one of the most highest potencies that you could ever get your hands on. And it usually comes in a powder form and things like that. And
What's
so
like a what's like a non-lethal amount of China White?
well, there's no non-lethal amount because
Oh, okay.
the smallest amount, which would be, let's say, a tip of a toothpick, could stop your heart
Dang.
like
So you
that.
took 2 grams of that.
Yeah, I snorted a gram in each nostril, and my heart stopped instantly. You
Dang.
know,
Yeah.
and I like literally just put myself to bed. And
Mm.
so yeah, and in that state, my mom came home. She saw me like that. My mom, being a Middle Eastern woman, being a religious background other than Christian, being a Muslim lady, She basically, started to praying to every deity that she could think of that she could pray to, and when the
That's not a
EMT.
typical Muslim activity, is it?
No, 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 no.
No.
Because Muslims typically what they believe in is
Yeah.
in one God, and
No
you
God but
know,
Allah, and yeah.
yeah, exactly.
So this was
And
quite desperate of her then to be
it was
praying to. Yeah.
exactly. It was a moment of desperation for her. But also in Islam, it does teach that Jesus is a healer. You know,
Okay.
so when my mom was when the EMTs were saying to her, "Ma'am, like there's nothing more we could do," my mom prayed to Jesus at that moment, and she
Hmm.
told the EMTs to shock me one last time. And when they did, my mom said my fingers moved a little bit, and they found a faint heartbeat. You know, so I
Wow.
was rushed to the hospital here in Glendale Adventist in Glendale, California, and for 28 days I was in a coma. Had no motor skills, no nothing.
Hmm.
And in those 28 days, I had a physical encounter with a man who was dressed in white. And this man, he held my hand like a father would hold a little kid's hand to walk him across the street. And I felt things I never felt before. I felt love. I felt compassion. I felt safe. I felt worth, right? Um,
Wow.
I felt so many things that I didn't feel from my real dad. Like my dad, he's not a big supporter. Like he supports me and stuff now, but he
Hmm.
doesn't know how to express love to you. You know what I mean? He never once in 37 years my dad was like, "I'm proud of you, son."
Wow. A little
It,
tough.
it,
Yeah. Tough for him to go there, and so you were feeling this, and given kind of how you've described your story so far, I would imagine that these feelings of comfort and love were really quite foreign to you in general. Am I right?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, they were very foreign. I thought honestly, I thought I was still on drugs, and I thought I was hallucinating
Sure.
all of this, But this man who was dressed in white, who held my hand and walked with me, he whispered 7 words in my ear, and those words were, "It is not your time. Wake up."
Hmm.
And I got up, and I was in this hospital, and I was in a coma, but I got up, functioning, talking, moving, trying to get out of the bed. In fact, the nurses and doctors and pretty much everyone at that hospital freaked out. They were like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, calm down," you know. And so, they freaked out. Then they immediately rushed in the room. They started doing tests and all sorts of things, and I'm like still tripping out. After everything that settled and everything that settled, the uh the doctor came in and she started to explain to me that you know that I should have been a vegetable, that I should not have motor skills, that in fact she was talking with my mom throughout those 28 days about long-term disability care for me. Like,
Wow.
what is that? How would that look like for her? And what my life would be like that, being a vegetable.
Yeah, and if I understand right, the reason.
Edward, sorry
Oh,
about
you
that.
have a
My
dog?
dog.
If I understand right, the reason that you should have been a vegetable is because when you were passed out for that long, blood is not flowing through your brain, and
Right.
without that oxygen to your brain, what is it, like just a few minutes, I think, that you can be
Not
permanent?
even few seconds. It's like I think it's like 1 minute without oxygen, you're having brain damage already.
Okay, yeah, something like that. So whatever, yeah, definitely less than how long that you were
Right.
out. And if I remember right, too, you said it was like 7 minutes that you were found
Right.
dead. But your
Right.
mom found you this way. So
Right.
it would presumably be longer whenever it was that, you passed out versus when she found you. And then seven
Right.
minutes there forward was still more time being
Right.
passed out. Wow.
Yeah. So,
Amazing.
you know,
Okay, and so you had this experience and
I,
encountered love and light and compassion and heard those words. You woke up. So
yeah.
what then?
Then the doctor, they told my mom and myself that they were going to keep me in the hospital for an additional 15 days for observation, because they had the fear of me going back into the coma.
Hmm.
You know, they wanted to make sure that everything was good. And for those 15 days while I was at this hospital, I kept hearing this voice, like clearly and loud, you know, I kept hearing this voice saying, "I love you." And I still didn't understand what that was. I really, really, really thought that whatever was dripping down in those IV bags into my veins, it was some good stuff, man. I was hallucinating. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, I thought I was tripping. But then when
What were they putting in, just like in
I
those
don't know,
IV?
I think it was just saline.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah.
just
Probably something
for
like that.
yeah. I
Okay.
really don't know what it was, man. But I kept hearing this voice saying, I love you," every night, every single night. You know,
Wow.
and now I still didn't understand what that was. I didn't get it. So one night, I had a nurse named Miss Mary. She came in, and she was like, "Hey, I got to draw some blood and do this and blah blah blah." And I said, "Okay, no problem." So she's drawing blood and she's asking me, like, how I feel and things like that. And I noticed she was wearing a cross, and so I just started asking her, like, "Are you a Christian?" She's like, "Yeah." I was like, "That's cool." And then I said, "Hey, I think I'm hallucinating," and I tell her I'm hearing voices, and she goes, "Well, what are these voices telling you?" And I tell her that they're saying I love you, you know,
Hmm.
and I share with her my vision, and she immediately stops, and she tells and asks me if I heard of Jesus Christ, you know, and in Islam, yeah, I told her, yeah, I've heard of Jesus Christ. He's a prophet, in Islam, Jesus is a prophet, and so she starts telling me about Jesus Christ, and she starts sharing a little bit of the gospel with me, you know? And from what she was sharing with me about who this person was, who this Jesus was, I began to recognize the feeling, how she was describing him, that he was full of compassion, that he was merciful, that he was
Hmm.
gracious, that he was, loving. And I began to put two and two together, you know? And so I kind of tell her, "Hey, I think I met Jesus," you know? And so we had this long conversation. By the end of my 15-day stay at Glendale Adventist, uh, she introduces me to the hospital chaplain there,
Okay.
and he starts sharing a little bit more of the gospel with me. And at that moment, I made a decision that altered and changed my life forever. At that moment, I decided that I wanted to become a Christian, and I wanted to learn about this guy Jesus, and this person. And so I gave my heart. I said a prayer, and and I was like, okay, that's cool. Like, I've seen it done in churches before, because when I was younger, it's crazy. When I was younger, one day one day my friend, he was dating a girl, and she was a like super Christian girl, but we weren't Christians. So she
Okay.
had invited my friend. In order for my friend to date her, he had to come to church. And my friend, well, I'm 16 years old at this point. I think 16 or 15 or 16, 17 years old, somewhere around there. So in order for my friend to date this girl, he had to go to her church. So we got the idea of, like, getting really intoxicated and walking into this church.
Jeez. Okay.
But it was one of those, it was a weird church, because they were like running around doing cartwheels, waving flags,
Oh, you're Pentecostal, full on.
yeah, and
All
they
right.
were like, and they started speaking in some weird tongue, and so it was crazy. We
They
were
probably just thought
intoxicated.
you were drunk in the Holy Spirit, as they often
Yeah,
say.
so we started actually talking our language, right? But what we were doing is we were yelling out curses,
Oh,
like
okay.
cussing inside this church, and everyone did think like we were full of some, we were full of the spirit, and you know, um,
Jeez.
but yeah, I say that to say this is because when I gave my heart to God, I started learning what all that meant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I started learning what gifts were. I started learning, all of that. So that's why I bring that story up,
Mm.
you know. But yeah, I give my heart to God, and I'm like, okay, great. And then they're like, well, what's the next step for you? Like, what are you gonna do? And the first thing I told them is I need to find a rehab program. I need to find a place where I could get clean, because I didn't know what the future was gonna hold for me. And
Yeah.
so I found a Christian rehab program in Los Angeles called Teen Challenge,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a year long program. In fact, the first time I went through Teen Challenge, I lasted about 8 months before I got kicked out. You
Oh,
know,
really?
yeah.
Wow. Because you
And then
weren't a
I had
teenager, or what?
no, because Teen Challenge is not for teens; it's for adults. It's just
Okay.
called yeah, it's just called Teen Challenge. Um, and they have them everywhere. They have Teen Challenges, but maybe they have over 500 locations in all of the United States, pretty
Mm.
much. And I think they have uh, 112 centers in 110 different countries, or 1,200 centers in 110 different countries. So they're a huge Christian recovery program. So I went to this program, and the first time I didn't last more than 8 months. I got kicked out for being a knucklehead. You know,
Okay.
uh, I'm a very hard headed person.
That's saying something for it being a recovery program, and they're still like, oh, this is too much.
Yeah, no, it's very strict. Like,
Mm.
I'm not gonna lie, but the reason that it's strict, it does have a 85% success rate
Okay.
if you stick through it. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's
And
great.
yeah, and apply what they teach you. And so then I went back into the program, and then this time I finished the year, and in that year, I felt so close to God. I felt so in tune with Him, and I felt this calling on my life to be a voice, to help people, to seek people that were like me, that are Middle Eastern, who just need help,
Yeah.
families and friends.
Yeah, yeah, because you received Christ at the hospital, but you still
Right,
wanted to like God is with you now, and so there's that support and that great benefits and salvation in your life. But you also want to be responsible for the kind of life that you have been living, and just knowing that there are these still tendencies that exist. That with God's help, then you can work toward to seeing those resolved.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So once I finished the recovery process, Teen Challenge, I had a Bible college attached to it, uh, and so I went to that also, and then that's where I met you, Matthew, at
Mm-hmm.
Imago Day,
Yeah.
in Downey, California, and now, forward to current time, I've been serving at Teen Challenge in Houston, Texas for a while. Until recent, I moved back to California, where I feel like God has called me for a bigger purpose. And that purpose, currently, He's been a little bit showing me every day about that purpose of what it is. And it's to help people who are lost, who don't know Christ, who are Muslims, and
Mm.
kind of engage in deep conversation with them. but 90% of the people that I'm engaging in conversation with is not about Jesus or the Bible or anything. It's mainly families who are desperate because they have a son or a daughter or a nephew or niece who is struggling with drugs and alcohol, and they don't know how to get them help. They don't know where to turn to, what to do, you know? So, with that, God has allowed this door to open and the avenue to share his love and compassion, um, through that, you know. And
Yeah.
what I've noticed is not all the time you have to cram a Bible down someone's throat and tell them, well, the Bible says so, the Bible says so, the Bible, because most, if people don't believe in the Bible, right, Matt,
Yeah.
they're not going to believe what you tell them anyways. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
like in Islam, one of the biggest things is, one of the biggest things that a lot of people, a lot of Christians do when they meet a Muslim, they automatically want to give them, well, the Bible in this chapter and this verse says this. Yet people need to understand, in Islam, you know, they don't care because they don't believe in the Bible. They feel is man written, is man made, and there's errors
Mm.
and all of that. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Well, I know that the Quran does uh, pull material a lot from the Old Testament
right,
when it talks about like Moses and other prophets of that
right,
time.
exactly. But the Quran, you know, the Quran was written in two different time frames. You know, the first time frame was when their prophet was marrying his first wife, Khadijah, right?
Okay.
She was a Nasara, which means she was a Christian at the time. And in order for their prophet to marry Khadijah, he had to like be married in a church, you know?
Mm.
And there's a whole different thing about that too. But regardless, the writings are in two different time frames. So the fact that you see in the Quran about Moses and things like that is because where the prophet was living was predominantly a lot of Jewish people then, you know? And so for the first 12 years of his life, he was trying to convert people to this religion called Islam. So he figured, hey, if I add, you know, stories of Moses and Abraham and this and that, they may authenticate it and say, yeah, this is right. We should follow this guy. But
Okay.
in the first 12 years, no one followed him. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Like, no, they, in fact, the Jews at the area he was living, they rejected all of his teachings because he had made so many errors on historical facts. Like, for example, one historical fact is Jesus in Islam, right? uh, his name is Isa, right?
Mm-hmm.
But who is Isa? Most people don't know who he is. If you do some research, his genealogy is different from the genealogy that we find in the Holy Bible.
Hmm.
You know, we find Isa in the Islam, his genealogy, like literally, is his mom is Mary, her brother is Aaron, her brother is Moses, and their dad is Himran. You know, so
Sure.
how is Jesus from the line of Moses when they're two different decades apart? You know what I'm saying? So
Well, you've got a lot in you with that just because of your history with Islam and your
right,
family. And I'm
right,
sure we could keep going in that direction for a good
right,
long while. But
exactly,
maybe
but
we can kind of pull it back in and
sure,
you were talking about your time just kind of up into the present now. You've been serving with Teen Challenge, and now, if I remember right, you just moved back to Los Angeles
yes,
because of what the Lord might have for you there. Um,
yeah.
so, any kind of ideas, or was it more just like a prompting from the
Well,
Lord?
well, I think what it is God. I don't think I'm going to be living in LA. I think where God is leading me is to my hometown of Modesto, California,
Okay.
where He's pushing me towards to go there,
Mm,
um, to live there because there's such a huge need. You know, Modesto is a small town that I grew up in, and currently there's so many lost people there, and so many people are refugees who have are living there from Afghanistan and different cultures and different Muslim backgrounds, where I feel where God has a lot of work for me there. Even right now, as I'm speaking to you, I'm helping this family who are Hindus, you know,
Mm,
but their daughter, she has an alcoholic, she has a problem with alcohol, and so I've been helping their mom and dad to kind of walk through the area of recovery for their daughter and what does
mm,
that look like. And in order for doing that, God has also been working in the lives of her mom and dad to kind of be open and receptive to the Bible, to the teaching of the Bible. The daughter not so much yet, but I have faith that God will little by little break her little heart, and give her
yeah,
a heart of flesh, as
totally.
it says
Ez-
in the Bible, you know.
Ezekiel 36, I think. But yeah,
Right, as it says in Ezekiel, so that's what I've been praying for, so currently, I'm here in LA, but I'll be moving to Modesto here in a little
excellent.
bit to kind of start this new adventure. I honestly don't know what God has in store for me, but what I do know is that He can never steer me the wrong way. He can never lead me down to a path. Even the path may seem weird and treacherous and dangerous, right? Um,
Yeah,
I know He'll
yeah,
make it straight because in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and He'll make your path straight, you know,
yeah.
and
Well,
so
given your history with him, like being dead and brought back to life and encountering
yeah,
Christ, now there's I can see there'd be a lot of faith for God's continued work in your life. And I would hope
yeah,
for anyone also watching that they would know that too, because the same God who met Kevin also wants to meet everyone,
yeah,
and empower everyone
yeah,
for service, however you might be calling them.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Kevin, that's exciting, and I'm excited for you. I look forward to hearing kind of what the Lord does in the coming months and years in your life. Um, but hey, maybe one or two quick things before we wrap up. You mentioned how when you were at the hospital that the nurse and the chaplain were sharing the gospel to you, and
Sure.
so could you explain that content a little more? Like, what exactly were they sharing with you? What is a gospel that you learned from them there?
So basically, what they were sharing with me, it was just the character and personality of Jesus as a man, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was so helpful to me from going from a non-believer, right, a person who does not believe in something, to recognize person's character, right? So that was very crucial to me on how they shared it, because I've learned through that, it's like I said all the time, you don't always have to hit somebody over the head with the Bible or throw Bible verses at them to convince somebody of of your belief. You know what I mean? But just sharing a more on a personal level, on a human level, like this is a man whose name is Jesus, and this is his character. This is what he did. This is how he did
Mm-hmm.
it. Could reflect so much more. But not only that, is you as an individual, your personality also has to be different too. Because one thing I've learned is sometimes I'm the only Bible people will ever read. you know and
Mm,
so if I'm if my character is flawed, and I have anger issues, and which I do, I'm not perfect here,
mm,
like I fall all the time, but through that, as they were sharing that, I began to recognize the feelings that I had in my vision to what they were trying to tell me, you know. So that was how they shared it with me, and then once I got into the recovery program, and that's where I got deeper and learned how to read the Bible and learn how to pray and learn a little bit more.
okay, yeah. But you were talking too about how like you you surrendered your life to Jesus, and that
Yeah,
was at the hospital, right? And so first heard about Jesus, and that like he's good and he's beautiful and he was the one who you encountered in that vision or in that experience, meeting him physically, as you called it, when you were out. But then it led to a point where it's like, oh, I need to surrender myself to him. And so how did you
Right.
get from like knowledge to surrender?
It's just, it, in my background, I surrendered my life to drugs, right?
Mm.
I went from knowledge of learning about drugs. Oh, if I take this pill, if I smoke this, if I take that, I'm gonna feel like this. To now, it's like I'm gonna go do it and surrender to it. So it's the same concept. Is I went from, okay, I understand the knowledge, but I'm gonna willfully surrender, right? Most religions, it's like people will tell you Islam means peace, right, or
Mm-hmm.
submission, right? But it's not a willful submission; it's a forced submission. You convert or you die. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So with Christianity, what I've learned is that you have to be willing to surrender yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I've realized about the God of the Bible, he's not going to force himself on you and make you surrender to him. You know, he's, first of all, he's a gentleman, and he's not going to do that. And he's patient enough for you to come to a point in your life sometimes, then you make that decision. And when you do, and when that the time comes, he's always there, you know, with open arms, open heart, and loving you no matter what you do, where you are. He's always there. So when you come to a point when you personally want to surrender yourself, that's when you're allowing the him to say, okay, I got you now. You know. So for me, it was under coming to the point at the end of myself to say, I, Kevin, personally surrender to you my life, and I
Mm.
put my trust in you to take me and do what you do with my life. Do as you please with it. My life
Okay.
is yours. You
So was
know?
it a little later with Teen Challenge that you had like kind of a learning knowledge of like sin and his death and
Right.
resurrection?
Right.
Okay, yeah. Okay,
Exactly.
yeah. Because those are the elements, of the gospel that how,
Right.
we were sinners, Christ died for us, and depending on where people are at in their whole stage of learning about Jesus, sometimes it's like whatever this is, I surrender to it, and then the Lord
Right.
kind of enlightens. So, okay, yeah,
Right.
gotcha. That makes sense. Cool. And so, if you were going to essentially speak back to your former life, or even just reflect back on your former life, like what would you say to that?
Well, I would say first, two words: Spike Lee and Nancy Reagan. Just say no.
Okay.
No, I'm just joking, man.
Uh,
If I were to speak to my former life, I would tell my former life to one, to don't do drugs. Like don't go down that path, and get to know Jesus right away.
mm,
You know, because honestly, when you don't have Jesus in your life, you kind of sit there and wonder why your life has no direction sometimes, why there's no happiness or joy or peace within you, why there's so much drama, why there's so much fighting, bickering, blah blah blah, right? Why there's so many things like that going on. But when you have Jesus in your life, those things are not stopped. Those things are still there. But the difference is that you have someone who's going to guide you through those and
mm,
give you peace in and through those situations, and give you understanding through those situations. I would tell my younger self to pray more, to read more, to follow more. You know, so that's what I would tell myself.
sure. Yeah. To get into the rhythms of the Christian life. And of course,
Right.
important to know Christ, kind of at the front of that. But yeah, I hear you. There's good rhythms and disciplines that are just very helpful because the Lord, He doesn't just tell us to do these things because that's what we're supposed to do, but because they actually do bring life and benefit for us, and he knows what's best for us. And so that makes a lot of sense. Kevin, thank you so much for your time
No worries,
today and
Matthew. Thank you
sharing your
for having me.
story. Yeah, but it's been fun, and I look forward to our continued conversations. Thank you, everyone who's been watching this. I hope that this was encouraging for you as well to hear a little bit about Kevin's story. And again, what Kevin mentioned, a teen challenge. If you find yourself struggling with drug addiction, then this is a great program, and I've heard their name elsewhere too. So you can look that up. I'll try and include a link in the description or something if I remember
Right.
to do that.
Yeah, you
But
could even if you want, you could even email me, Matt, if you want to put my email in the description. If not,
why don't you tell us your email
yeah,
right now,
yeah,
if that's all right? And the reason
yeah,
is
yeah,
because
yeah.
I just don't know what kind of spam bots are out there when I write out
I
an
got
email.
I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, my email is Kevin Kevin dot Azizpour at gmail.com. If y'all have any questions or anything like that, you could reach directly out to me with anything, anything at all. So
All right. Well, great. Again, thank you so much. And this went great. I'll talk to you later, Kevin, and hope this was encouraging for all of you. Bye.
absolutely. See you guys.